Masechet Nazir Daf Nun Vav. We're talking about a case of a Nazir who is also a Mesorah. The Mishnah, read simply, sounds like if a Nazir becomes a Mesorah, then the days during which he is for sure Tameh and purification do not count towards his Nazirut. Mesorah goes through 3 stages. One, when he's being tested, and if he looks like he has some signs, then he goes into quarantine. So the quarantine time, he's still tahor, so he continues counting that time, no problem. But then if the Kohen decides he's for sure a Mesorah mukhlat, so then he's definitely, when the skin disease goes away and he looks better, then he starts his purification process, which means he has to shave all the hair on his head and body on the first day and on the 7th day, and after that, on the 8th day, he brings his korbanot and then he's done. So during those the second 2 time periods, when he's Mesorah mukhlat, and while he's during his purification, he cannot continue counting, but it doesn't negate the days that he already started. So he just restarts on the 7th day, continuing the count that he had before. That's what it sounded like from the Mishnah. But then Rav Chisda came and gave us a chidush yesterday, and he said that, well, if it's a short nizirut, only 30 days, well then it will have to negate everything before, because simply that he has to have enough hair to shave at the end of his nizirut. For nizirut tahara requires shaving his head, so he's going to have to add 30 days no matter what. But he says, if it's a long Nazirut, let's say 100 days, and he becomes Mesorah somewhere in the beginning, so then he can continue counting right through, and they'll have plenty of time, more than 30 days after he's pure, and therefore he'll have to serve only 100 days altogether. And you can continue counting right through the Mesorah Mukhlat, and right through the purification time period. That was Rav Chisda's chidush. It's a big, nice kula that he can continue counting right through. All right, we had a challenge to it, and we answered that one. But today we're going to have 2 challenges to it, and they're not going to be answered. Rav Chisda will be refuted. Okay, so let's see the first one. The first one is a complicated case from a Mishnah that's coming up soon. So we're going to see this Mishnah anyway. It's good to get a good intro to it. It's a very interesting case. Mativ Rami bar Hama. Nazir shahya tameh besafek umukhlat besafek ochel bekodashim lachar 60 yom veshote yain umit tameh lametim lachar 120 yom. That's the Mishnah. In a second, we're going to see a Tosefta. This Mishnah is about a 30-day Nazir. We're going to see a Tosefta that applies it to a 100-day Nazir, and the question is going to be from that Tosefta. Okay, so we have a bunch of layers to this question, so let's take them step by step. Now you have a Nazir, we're talking about a 30-day Nazir, who not only was he a Nazir, he was also Tameh Lamet Besafek. Okay, he's not sure if he's Tameh Lamet or not. Also, he's a Mesorah Mukhlat, means he's for sure he became a Tameh as a Mesorah, but misafek, but he's not sure. How could you be sure and not sure? It means that a Kohen came, for example, and said, oh, there's 2 people standing there, and he said, you are Mesorah Mukhlat, and he left. And we're not sure who he was pointing to, which one of us. So one of us is a Mesorah Mukhlat, but I'm not sure if it's this one or that one. Okay, now the only thing worse than being Tameh is being Safek Tameh, at least for a Nazir. We're going to see why exactly. All right, this Mishnah is going to say that he can eat Kodashim after 60 days, but he will not be able to drink wine and become Tameh Lamet, meaning the Nazirut is not over until 120 days pass. Even though he's only a 30-day Nazir, he's going to have to be a Nazir. He's going to have to refrain from wine for 120 days in order to fulfill all the different permutations and doubts that we have. Okay, so we're going to have to explain this. It is a bit complex, but it's really interesting if you think about it. All right, so let's say we have a simpler case of a Mesorah, and he's a Nazir. Let's say he's for sure a Nazir and for sure a Mesorah Mukhlat. All right, well in that case, he's gonna be counting whatever. Let's say it happens on the first day of his Nazirut, it becomes a Mesorah Mukhlat. So then no problem. He doesn't count those days. According to the Mishnah, he doesn't count those days. And then he can shave, right? This is the key point. Even though a Nazir is not allowed to shave his hair, But if he's a Mesorah, then he has permission to shave his hair. And in fact, he can't continue counting, so it's impossible for him to get to the end of the Nazirut in any case until he gets rid of his Sarat, at least according to the Mishnah's opinion that said you don't count those days. So he will, as soon as he becomes, as the skin disease goes away, he will shave on the first day, shave again on the seventh day, and then he can start counting his Nazirut, or continue counting his Nazirut. All right, so that's the normal case. The point is a Nazir who's a Mesorah is allowed to shave. All right, now let's say if he's just a Tameh Lamet. Okay, that we know. If a Nazir becomes Tameh Lamet, so that negates all his days, and he has to shave. So even though he's a Nazir, he has permission. In fact, he must shave so that he can start again his counting. All right, so those are the simple cases when he's for sure one or the other. But when it's safek, then it becomes more complicated. Here's a nice chart that I copied from Art Scroll. And we follow like this, okay? So we have, if he's not sure, a safek metzorah, here's the complication. Because he's a safek metzorah, when he gets sarat, let's say he takes upon himself a 30-day nazirut. He gets sarat, he gets safek sarat and safek tumat met on the first day, right? The first day he's informed, oh, you might have got this, he might have said that you're a mesorah, and you also found out you might have touched a dead body. Okay, so now he's both on that first day. So the mesorah will come in, this Nazir will come and say, listen, I want to shave my whole body because so I can start my sara'at treatment. But the rabbi will tell him, no, sorry, maybe you're not a mesorah. And if you're not a mesorah, then you're not allowed to shave. So you have to do a 30-day period to fulfill, just in case you're just a regular Nazir and you're not tameh at all, and you're not a mesorah at all. All right, good. So he does the 30 days, and he comes back and he says, okay, can I drink wine now? Right? I finished my Nazirut. And the rabbi tells him, no, sorry, you can't, because maybe you were a mesorah. So this will just count for your first sara'at shaving. He says, okay, fine. So the rabbi will go back and wait more days. The guy will say, oh, well, so this is my first day, so can I shave again on the seventh day so I can finish my sara'at? The rabbi says, no, you can't. You know why? Because maybe, in fact, you are still a Nazir, because maybe you were actually a Nazir Tameh. And if you were Nazir Tameh, then the shaving you just did was just to complete the Nazir Tum'ah, and now that negates everything, and you have to start now your regular Nazirut. So go do 30 days. Okay, so he goes, does 30 days more. He comes back, he says, okay, can I drink wine now? Well, the rabbi says, no, sorry, because maybe you were Safek Mesorah. In that case, you shaved once, that was like the first day one, and you shaved the second time, that's the second Sara'at shaving. But you still have to do your Nazirut period. So go back and do another 30 days. He comes back after 30 days, and he says, then the Mesorah says, okay, now can I drink wine? He says, no. Well, if you were Nazir Tahor, then you would have been able to. But maybe you were Nazir Tameh, and you had to shave for that reason. So go back and do another 30 days. So it's only after 120 days that he takes care of all the possibilities. Okay, to summarize that a little bit once again, a Nazir who is Safek Mesorah and Safek Tameh, he's going to have to shave 4 times altogether. Twice because of the Sara'at, once as a Nazir Tameh, and once as a Nazir Tahor, as any Nazir has to do at the end. And it has to be in a specific order, because he can't be a Nazir Tahor, he can't start counting until he finishes his Nazir Tum'ah. But he can't shave right away for his Nazir Tum'ah because maybe he's not Tameh. And so he has to wait 30 days between each shaving, just in case he's still a regular Nazir and has to fulfill his Nazirut. So he's not allowed to just jump the gun and shave, right? So once again, if he knew for sure he was Tameh Lamet, then he'd be able to do that purification process, get Paraduma on the 3rd and 7th, right? Shave, bring Korbanot, and then start all over, and then start counting, right? He can do that within a week. It only takes a week to become Tahor from being Tameh Lamet. And similarly, if he knew for sure he was a Mesorah, then he could shave right away. In the middle of his Nazirut, he shaves on the 1st and 7th. So each one by itself, to become Tahor as from Tumat Met, and to become Tahor from being a Mesorah, each one takes only a week. Right, so theoretically, all he would need were those 2 weeks, and then he can start counting his 30. But because it's only safek, and therefore, if he's just a tahor mesor, a tahor nazir, then he's not allowed to shave because from sarat. He's not allowed to shave as a nazir tameh, and so that's why he has to wait 30 days just in case that was his full regular nazirut, and then he could do a shaving. That's good, but that shaving will count only for one of them, and then, well, maybe that took care of the Nazirut Tameh, so now we can start again. Fine, he starts again. Maybe that was his Nazir Tahor, could be, or not. Maybe he was Mesorah, and then he did the 2 Mesorah ones, and now maybe he's Tahor, and he could end after this, but maybe not. Maybe he's also Nazir Tameh. So that's how we get to 120 days. All right, that's for him to finish his Nizirut. After 60 days, however, he can eat Kodashim. Why? Because after 60 days, he did his first Mesorah and second Mesorah shavings. So now he's finished with his Sarat. He'll bring Korbanot the next day. He also can get sprinkled during that time with Para Aduma on the 3rd and 7th day of any time during in between, and so now he's not Tameh Lamet anymore. So now he's totally tahor. So therefore he can bring korbanot and he can bring korbanot only after 60 days because he's definitely not tameh anymore. But we're not going to talk about korbanot now, when exactly he brings the korbanot, because he has to bring korbanot as a mesorah, he has to bring his korbanot as a nazir tameh, and he's going to bring korbanot after being nazir tahor. Okay, so leave the korbanot out, but now we understand this Mishnah, how we get 60 days, he can eat kodashim, and after 120 days, then he is back to normal, and he can start drinking wine. Okay, so Rami Bar Chama brought this Mishnah, Nazir Besefek Mukhlat Sheu Tameh Besefek Mukhlat Besefek. Tameh just means Tameh Lemet. Ochel Kodashim Achar Shishim Yom. He can eat Kodashim after 60 days. Beshotei Yain Umi Tameh Lemetim Lachar Me'av Estim Yom, and he can be Tameh Lemet after and drink wine after 120 days. All right, that's the Mishnah. Now, next step in building our question, Vetani Allah in the Tosefta says, "B'medrim amorim benizirut moetet, ava benizirut bat shana, ochel bekodashim lachar sheteh shanim." Says this Mishnah only applies in a short term in that nizirut of 30 days. But let's say he says, "I'm going to be nazir for 1 year." Well, then it'll be the same law, but in proportion. He can eat kodashim after 2 years. V'shotei yain umit tameh lametim lachar Arba Shanim, and they'll be able to drink wine and become Tameh Lamet after 4 years. So in other words, it's the same exact law. We can look back at the chart and just instead of 30 days, put 1 year. And it'll be all the same logic. He's going to go and say, hey, listen, I want to go and I might be a Mesorah. He tells the rabbi, right, I might be a Mesorah. So can I go and shave for my Sarat right now? Right, my skin disease cleared up. And the rabbi will say, no, but because maybe you're not a Mesorah, and therefore you're not allowed to shave in your middle of your Nizirut. So no, you have to go do Nizirut Tahara. Come back in a year. So he does a possibility for a Nizirut Tahara. He comes back in a year and he tells the rabbi, okay, can I shave now? Can I drink wine now? And the rabbi says, no, you cannot drink wine because it could be you were Nazir Tahor, and now you could drink wine, but maybe not. Maybe you actually were a Mesorah, and therefore you only did the first shaving of your Mesorah. So then the guy says, okay, fine. So I did my first shaving of Mesorah. In 7 days from now, can I do my second shaving of a Mesorah? And he says, no, sorry, you can't do that second shaving because maybe you're not a Mesorah. Maybe you're just a Nazir Tameh. And what you just did so far, that shaving that you did after 1 year was your shaving for Nazirut Tum'ah. And so now you have to do your Nazirut Tahara. So you can't shave in the middle of your Nazirut Tahara. Go do your Nazirut Tahara for the second year. So he goes away and he does the second year. He comes back to the rabbi after 2 years. He says, okay, I'm good now, right? I did my Nazirut Tum'ah. I did my Nazirut Tahara. Now I can drink wine, right? And the rabbi says, no, not so fast, because maybe you are a Mesorah. And if you're a Mesorah, then you did the first shaving of Mesorah and second shaving of a Mesorah. But you still have to do your Nazirut, but you still have to do your regular Nazirut Tahara. So go come back in a year. So he does his Nazir, he comes back in a year. He says, now can I drink wine? He says, no, not so fast, because maybe you were also a Nazir Tameh, and that third shaving you just did was for your Nazirut Tum'ah, but you never even started your Nazirut Tahara, so come back after a fourth year, and that's why you need 4 years altogether. And here is the key to the question. Now that we understand that Tosefta, Ve'i sakad atach salkin le yomeh, tiske le b'shalosh shanim u'shloshim yom. If Rav Chisda is right, and in a long Nazirut, and this is a long Nazirut if it's 100 days, if it's a long Nazirut, Rav Chisda said you are allowed to count the days while he was a Mesorah, right? While he was Tameh, and the days of purification. You can continue counting all that right through for his Nazirut. If you can continue counting, then he wouldn't have to wait 4 years to shave. It would be enough for him to wait 3 years and 30 days. How so? Let's look back at our chart. So let's say he is a Mesorah. Okay, so he's going to do the first, but he's not sure. He might be a Mesorah, he might be a Nazir Tahor. So if he's Nazir Tahor, he can't shave, so he's going to have to do 1 year. But he might be a Mesorah, so he's going to shave after the shave number 1. He has to do shaving number 2, but he can't shave right away because maybe he was not maybe he was a Nazir Tameh. Okay, so he's going to have to do the second one. Okay, at this point here, after 2 years, now one of the possibilities, if he was a Mesorah, fine. So now he did his second shaving for a Mesorah, and according to Rav Chisda, those 2 years also apply for his Nazirut Tahara, right? Any one of the years, because now he did 2 years, more than necessary. So actually, he fulfilled his Nazirut Tahara as well, right? Remember, Rav Chisda says you can count your Nazirut even while you are Mesorah, completely Tameh. So at this point, if he is not, let's say he's not Tameh Lamet, so he finished his Mesorah, now all he has to do is shave one more time for his Nazirut Tahara. He will have to wait 30 days because he has to grow more hair, at least 30 days of growth. So that will be 2 years and 30 days. And then he would be done. Wait, we still have to take into account maybe he was a Nazir Tameh. Well, no problem. If he was a Nazir Tameh, then that shaving that he does after 30 days will be for Nazirut Tum'ah, and then he'll do 1 more year from after that 30-day mark. But altogether, that will be 2 years, 30 days, and then another 1 year. Altogether, 3 years and 30 days. So that's all you need. In other words, if you're able to count the Mesorah days also towards the Nazirut Tahara, then you don't have to wait a whole year for that 3rd year, because he either fulfilled it already during this time period, in which case he can shave, he's for sure done, or he is Nazir Tameh, and if he's a Nazir Tameh, then he doesn't have to wait a whole year, because he could shave even just after a few days, and then do his Nazirut Tahara. But either way, he wouldn't have to do this full 3rd year. And from the fact that this Tosefta does not say 3 years and 30 days, instead it says 4 years, we see that Rav Chisda's law does not work. Rav Chisda on the previous daf was able to reconcile his opinion with the Mishnah, but it cannot be reconciled with this Tosefta, which explicitly talks about a long-term Nazirut and assumes that you cannot count the Mesorah days overlapping with the Nazirut days. All right, that's the first challenge to Rav Chisda, and we don't have an answer for it. And so now we're going to bring another one. This is also a long baraita, but it's a midrash halacha, but it's relatively straightforward. Okay, ve'od mativ Rav Asher. We're going to bring the question all the way at the end, but this will be an obvious one. En li ela yemet tum'ah she'en olin lo min haminyan. So I know yemet tum'ah means tum'ah lamet. So I know that tum'ah lamet will not count towards the Nazirut. In fact, it negates all the days before it. Certainly the days while a person is tameh lamet, do not count towards Nazirut. Yemei chiluto minayin. But what about the days that he's confirmed as a Mesorah, right? Chilut Mesorah muchlat. He's confirmed Mesorah, right? Would those count or not? V'dinhu. Well, let's learn it from logic by comparing the two cases. Yemei tuma megalech umevi korban. V'yemei chiluto megalech umevi korban. Ma yemei tumato en olin lo min haminyan. Af yemei chiluto en olin lo min haminyan. So let's compare the time of Tumat Met. After he's finished being Tameh Lamet, he's going to have to shave and bring a Korban. And Mesorah, he has to, right, in order to restart his Nazirut. It's a law of Nazirut. After being Tameh Lamet, you have to restart. Now, Yemei Chiluto, after finishing after he's done with a Mesorah as purification, means he's going to have to shave and also bring korbanot as a Mesorah. Any Mesorah would have to do that. So they see they're comparable, and therefore, just like the days of Tumat Met do not count towards Nazirut, so too the days while he's Tameh as a Mesorah are not going to count towards them, because it was not a Kal Vachomer. It was just comparing the two that are similar. Okay, that seems to be good, but Lo im amarta bime tumato sheken mevatel bahem et hakodmin tuma bime chiluto she'en mevatel bahem et hakodmin. We now reject this comparison and we say no, you can't compare tumat met, where that negates the days that already happened before. So you can't compare that to Mesorah that does not negate. That's, this negating from before, that's explicit in the Torah, that Tumat Met negates all the days before. So you can't compare that to a Mesorah that does not negate the days before, and so therefore Tumat Met is surely more stringent. And that's why you wouldn't count the days of Tumat Met while he's Tameh Met, but you may very well count the days while he is a Mesorah. So that is not a proof that you wouldn't count the days. Okay, so this proof of just comparing that the fact they're similar, that is not a proof that you wouldn't count the days of Mesorah. Okay, so Yemei Chiluto minayin. So now we're going to look for another proof that the days of a Mesorah, while he is during his Tum'ah period, does not count. And now we're going to use a Kal Vachomer. Amarta Kal Vachomer hu. Uman Nazir bakevesh she'se'aro ra'ui letiglachat Nazirut en olin lo min haminyan. Yemei chiluto she'en se'aro ra'ui letiglachat Nazirut lo kol sheken. A Nazir bakever. That's a Nazir. Remember that we talked about this case when he begins his Nazirut while he's in the cemetery. Not a good idea to do that. But if he does that, the law is his Nazirut doesn't start counting while he's in the cemetery. He's Tameh. So he has to leave the cemetery, become Tahor, and then he starts counting. And the Chidush of that is that he doesn't have to shave. Any hair he already has, whatever grew that he had before, whatever that grew while in the cemetery, even no matter how long he's there, that he keeps. You only have to shave. Because of Tumat Met, if he started counting and because he was Tahor, he became Tameh Lamet, and now he wants to restart, then he has to shave off all his hair, and so he could restart counting. So here is actually a kula, where a Tumat Met is actually, in this case at least, more lenient than Sarat, because this type of Tameh Lamet, who started off in the cemetery, his hair can be used for the final Nazirut. After he finishes all his days of Tahara, he can cut that hair. And yet the days while he's Tameh do not count for him. Right? He doesn't count the days while he's Tameh for his Nazirut. So a Mesorah, a confirmed Mesorah, where he cannot use his hair that grows during that time period, because the Mesorah has to shave twice, in fact, to finish his Sara'at Tum'ah. So that is a chumrah of a Mesorah, that he cannot use that hair. He has to start growing hair again after he's done. So since that's a stringency, all the more so, the days while he was Tameh as a Mesorah should not count towards him. Okay, so that seems to be a good proof. And now, once we're on a roll, we're going to add even more to this. So now I prove that the days while he's Tameh as a Mesorah do not count. What about the days that he's counting to become Tahor, right? 7 days when he shaves on the 1st and 7th day. How about those days? What's a proof that they also don't count towards the Nazirut. V'dinhu, ma yemei chiluto ta'on tiglachat, af yemei sefaro, ma yemei chiluto en olin lo min haminyan, af yemei sefaro. Well, just like the days when he's confirmed as a mesorah, he has to shave at the end, so he can't use that hair. Also, the days of his so the 7 days of purification, he can't use any hair that grows during that time for his final Nazirut, because he's going to have to shave that again after the 7th day. So therefore, they're actually comparable. So neither of these can use any hair that grows. So also, just like as he's confirmed at Mesorah, he cannot count those days. Also, the days that he is during purification process, he cannot count towards Nazirut. So far, so good. Everything we just said is in fact going to be the halacha that those days don't count. Okay, by the way, you can see already from here how this is going to reject Rav Chisda, because Rav Chisda says that these days do count, right? Both of those periods, when he's for sure, when he's tameh and during his purification process, Rav Chisda said that it counts. But we just proved from here that no, they do not count. Okay, now the next part is we're still continuing in this baraita, the Midrash Halacha is going to go even a step further that we're going to end up rejecting. But the proof or against Rav Chisda we already saw. So we'll just finish the baraita. Yachol af yemei heskero ken. What about days when he's not yet for sure a mesorah? He's just confined. He's quarantined because he has some kind of skin discoloration, but the kohen did not decide for sure yet. So that guy, he's not actually a mesorah yet, right? He's not. It wasn't deemed for sure. So what about those days? Can they count? Do they also not count? V'adin noten halut mitameh mishkav umoshav v'yemei heskero mitameh mishkav umoshav im lamadeta yemei chiluto she'en olin lo min haminyan af yemei heskero en olin lo min haminyan. Well, someone who's a confirmed mesorah, he makes things tameh by lying or sitting on them. That's a special law. Not only if he touches them, even if he doesn't touch them, but he just puts his weight on something, he will make it tameh. Well, yemei heskero, someone who is quarantined, also causes that level of tum'ah, of mishkav and moshav. And so he's also tameh to that extent. So therefore, if the days when he's confirmed to be a mesorah do not count, also the days when he's quarantined should not count for his nizirut, right? And so that would make logical sense. But then we reject this last part. Amarta lo. Im amarta b'mei chiluto, sheken chiluto ta'on tiglachat u'mebi korban. Lefichach en olin. No, you can't compare them, because his days that he's confirmed to be a mesorah, to get out of that, he's going to have to shave and bring korbanot. And that's why those are very stringent and will not count. But the days he's quarantined, they do not require, right? If the Kohen comes and says, okay, you're good, right? Your skin disease went away. He doesn't have to shave and bring korbanot. So those days certainly are much more lenient, and therefore those days do count. Good. Mikan amru yemei sefaro v'yemei gemaro en olin min haminyan, aval yemei hazav v'hazava v'heskero shel mesorah hare elu olin lo. This is the end of the braita. The grand conclusion, after all that back and forth, in case you got lost, is that the days of his counting for purity, right? The last 7 days when he shaved the first and 7th day, and the days when he's confirmed to be a mesorah, those days cannot count towards his sarat. But if a person is a zav, this is a different case we didn't talk about yet, and we didn't talk about in this baraita, but a zav and zava, a different kind of tumah. It's a serious type of tumah, but that he can continue counting. If a nazir becomes a zav, it's okay. He just continues counting. And also heskero shel mesorah, and the days when he's quarantined, hare elu olin lo, these do in fact count. He can continue counting during that time period. So now we get to our question. Katana mihat lo im amarta bimei tum'ah sheken mevatel bahen et hakodmin tomar bimei chiluto b'mai ilema benizirut moetet haba'ainan gidul se'ar. Okay, so now we're going to go back and cite the particular part of the braita that we're going to use for the question, right? And back in the Braita, we said, no, if we can't compare Tumat Met, because that negates the days that are before. And that you cannot compare to Mesorah. And with that, the next line was, but assume that a Mesorah doesn't negate the days before, but those days themselves do not count, right? This whole Braita was assuming that confirmed the Mesorah does not count those days towards Nezirut. Now, this whole Baraita, what case is it talking about? If it's talking about a short-term period, meaning only 30 days, well then, actually, it would negate the days before. And that, as Rav Chisda himself said, if you're a short-term Nazir, and then you become a Mesorah, since you have to shave all your hair at that point to become tahor from being a Mesorah, so then you're going to have to wait another 30 days no matter what. So that, in effect, that does negate, right? If someone was a Nazir for even 29 days and becomes a Mesorah, so then he's going to have to do his Mesorah, right? Shave his body on the 1st and 7th day, and then he's going to have to do the whole 30 days. Even the first 28 days won't count for it because he needs enough hair to shave at the end of Nezirut. So it can't be talking about that, because in the short Nezirut, it does in fact negate all the days before. So, Ela la b'Nezirut merubah, v'katane she'en olin lo min haminyan, alma la salkin le shema mina. Rather, this Braita has to be talking about a long Nezirut, where you do not need to negate any of the days before. Like if it's for 100 days, and it becomes a Mesorah somewhere in the first half, and then it doesn't matter, he shaves his body, but there's still more than 30 days left. So that's the case where it will not negate any of the days before. And yet, this Baraita concluded that the days while he is a Mesorah confirmed and the purity days do not count towards the Nezirut. And so this is an absolute rejection of Rav Chisda. So that ends the two rejections against Rav Chisda. Okay, now we get to the next Mishnah. Amar Rabbi Eliezer mishum Rabbi Yoshua, kol tuma min hamet shenazir megalech aleha, chayavin aleha al biat mikdash. V'chol tuma min hamet she'en hanazir megalech aleha, en chayavin aleha al biat mikdash. So Rabbi Eliezer says in the name of Rabbi Yoshua. Okay, this is a little difficult because Rabbi Eliezer is actually the teacher of Rabbi Yoshua, and also of Rabbi Meir. That's coming up later. So if we look at a parallel in the Tosefta, it says Rabbi Elazar, and they are parallel. So here, as we go through, this is probably, in fact, Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua. Okay, anyway, so let's say Rabbi Elazar says in the name of Rabbi Yoshua, any type of Tum'at Met that a Nazir will have to shave. Remember in the previous two Mishnayot, we had the earlier Mishnah gave a list of all two types of Tumat Met that are serious, and the Nazir has to shave because of them. And then the second Mishnah we saw after that were lower levels of Tumat Met where Nazir, of course, it becomes Tameh Lamet, but he doesn't have to shave after those. So now we're going to extrapolate yet another application of those two categories. So any of the more serious ones in the first Mishnah that the Nazir would have to shave, that would also mean that he's not allowed to come to the Bet HaMikdash, and if he does, he would be liable. Whereas in the second category of lower levels of Tumat Met, such that the Nazir does not have to shave, if that person comes to the Bet HaMikdash as that type of Tumat Met, he is not liable. Okay, so that's the second application. That's the application to entering into the Bet HaMikdash area. That was the teaching of Rabbi Yoshua. Rabbi Meir, lo tehezo kala min hasheretz. Rabbi Meir says that doesn't make sense because after all, a sheretz, one of the 8 creepy crawlies that are dead, if someone touches them, they become tameh sheretz, and they are liable they are liable if they enter into the Bet HaMikdash. Now sheretz is a lower level than Tumat Met, so we can make a kol sheken. If someone who's Tameh Lasheretz will be liable if they enter the Bet HaMikdash, all the more so, someone Tameh Lamet, even the lower level Tumah Lamet, should be liable. So Rabbi Meir says, sorry, Rabbi Yoshua, your halacha does not make sense. That's the Mishnah. Okay, Rabbi Eliezer Mishum Rabbi Yoshua Gamarla, and again here, we should probably read Rabbi Elazar. says in the name of Rabbi Yehoshua, did Rabbi Elazar learn this from Rabbi Yehoshua? Veha mishum Rabbi Yehoshua bar memel gemarla. From the following Baraita, we're going to see that actually Rabbi Elazar did not learn it from Rabbi Yehoshua. That's the famous Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hanania, but rather from Rabbi Yehoshua ben Memel. This is a Tana. He's a disciple of Rabbi Yehoshua. So this is actually even a later person. So this for sure would have to be Rabbi Elazar, a later, the fourth generation Tana. And not Rabbi Eliezer, the teacher of Rabbi Akiva. Okay, so anyway, the point is that while in the Mishnah here it said that he learned, Rabbi Eliezer learned it from Rabbi Yehoshua, but in fact in the following Braita, that was Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hanania. From the following Braita, we're going to see that he learned it from Rabbi Yehoshua bar Memel. Okay, Detanya. Amar Rabbi Elazar, kishelachti le'ar daskya, masati et Rabbi Yehoshua ben Peter Rosh. That's his name. Another Rabbi Yehoshua. There's three Rabbi Yehoshuas here in case you're not confused enough. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Peter Rosh. Peter Rosh probably comes from a Greek name, meaning from Patros, which means one's father, the son of some patriarch. So this isn't even later Rabbi Yehoshua because he's studying under Rabbi Meir. Okay, so the point is, let's get back. Rabbi Elazar goes to the city and finds Rabbi Yehoshua ben Peter Rosh saying to Rabbi Meir, כל טומאה מן המת שהנזיר מגלח עליה, חייבים עליה משום ביאת מקדש. וכל טומאה מן המת שאין הנזיר מגלח עליה, אין חייבים עליה משום ביאת מקדש. He says the very same halacha we just saw in the Mishnah, that the high level tumat met, that it would cause a nazir to have to shave, that person is liable if they enter the Bet HaMikdash, whereas the lower level that does not make a nazir shave, that tumat met, one is not liable if they enter the Bet HaMikdash. Amar lo al teheh zo kala misheretz. And Rabbi Meir responded to him, that doesn't make sense, that tumat met would be more lenient than tumat sheretz. That's Rabbi Meir's line right here. Okay, so we see it's the same argument, but this time it's in the name of Rabbi Yehoshua bar Memel is the one that's saying it. Now, Rabbi Elazar shows up there. Amarti lo, kilumata baki Rabbi Yehoshua bar Memel. Rabbi Elazar says, oh wait, I know that halacha that you just said. Did you hear it from Rabbi Yehoshua bar Memel? Amar li hen. He says, yes, I did. Amar li Rabbi Yehoshua bar Memel mishum Rabbi Yehoshua. In fact, Rabbi Yehoshua bar Memel told me that in the name of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hanania. So here we have a chain of tradition from three Rabbi Yehoshuas. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Peter Rosh heard this in the name from Rabbi Yehoshua bar Memel, who himself heard it from Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hanania, who said, כל טומאה מן המת שהנזיר מגלח עליה חייב עליה משום ביאת מקדש, וכל טומאה מן המת שאין הנזיר מגלח עליה אין חייבים עליה משום ביאת מקדש. The very same law that there are two levels of tumah, only the higher level is liable if they go to the mikdash and not the lower level. Have mishum Rabbi Yehoshua bar Memel gamir la. Oh, so now we see that in fact the tradition comes from Rabbi Yehoshua bar Memel. That's who Rabbi Elazar heard it from, and he didn't hear it, at least not directly, from Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hanania. So how come over here it skips the generation? Rabbi Elazar actually heard it from the middle Rabbi Yehoshua, and here it goes back to the earlier Rabbi Yehoshua. Rabbi Yehoshua Stam is Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hanania, but Rabbi Elazar didn't hear it directly from him. He heard it from Rabbi Yehoshua bar Memel, who himself learned it from Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hanania. So what do we answer? Amru shema mina kol shemateta demit amira bebe telata kadme'e ubatre amrinan mesi'a'e la amrinan. We learn from here that any tradition that is passed down by three different generations of teacher to student, we don't necessarily mention every single step, but rather only the first and the last. We'll mention the originator, and then we'll mention the last one. and not the people in between. And so that makes sense. Over here, this is why we quoted the original Rabbi Yoshua ben Hanania, and we skipped the middle of the chain, Rabbi Yoshua bar Memel, and we went straight down to Rabbi Elazar. So this is actually a very important rule, because a lot of times we do see a tradition that's quoted in the name of a sage, and then he quoted the name of a much earlier sage. It doesn't mean that they heard it directly when there's a generation in between, but rather we say the beginning and the end of chain of transmission, and we don't always preserve all of the middle generations. Another proof of this, Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Afana namitanena, Amar Nachum halablar, כך מקובלני מיישה, שקיבל מאבא, שקיבל מן הזוגות, שקיבלו מן הנביאים, הלכה למשה מסיני בזורע שבט וחרדל בשניים ושלושה מקומות, שנותן פאה מכל אחד ואחד, ואילו יהושע וכלב לקח השיב שמאמינה. So after a look at this baraita where Nachum halablar said, I have a tradition from Rabbi Meyasha, one of the early Tanaim, who received it from his father, who received it from the Zugot. That's the 5 pairs of generations that go back during the second Bet HaMikdash, right? Hillel and Shammai are the end of them. They go way back. And they received it from the prophets, and who received it, Halakha Moshe Sinai. Okay, what is this law that has this whole tradition? It has to do with Pe'ah. Pe'ah is the corner of the field, has to be given from every section of the field, like if you're growing different items. So if one is growing dill and mustard in 2 or 3 separate locations, you have to give pe'ah for each and every one. You can't give one big pe'ah and tell all the poor people, everybody go to that corner, and I'm not going to give any pe'ah from this one. No, if they are separate fields with separate things growing in them, then you have to leave a corner from each and every field. That was the tradition. Now notice that we're missing something. Yoshua and Caleb, Moshe didn't give it directly to the Nevi'im. He gave it to Yoshua, who passed it on to Caleb. But they're not mentioned in this chain of tradition because we skip some of the people in the middle. In other words, not just that when there's 3 that you skip the middle one, even when there's a longer one, you skip some of the generations in the middle. And that's very important for lists and genealogies, and anytime you have generations of names, that you can't assume that every single person is mentioned there. All right, let's finish the very last Mishnah of the Perek. Amar Rabbi Akiva, Danti lifnei Rabbi Eliezer. Ma im aisem keseora she'eno metame adam be'ohel hanazir megalech al maga'o ve'al masa'o. Rabbi itam she'u metame adam be'ohel eno din she'yeh hanazir megalech al maga'a ve'al masa'a. Rabbi Akiva said, I presented the following Kal vachomer to Rabbi Eliezer. This is Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkenus. This is maybe why he got confused with the previous one. Rabbi Akiva, the 3rd generation Tana, is presenting before the famous Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkenus. That's the one that got excommunicated with Avin of Achnai. And Rabbi Akiva is presenting to test out this theory of the following Kal vachomer. An esim kesoda, a small bone the size of a barley, does not cause tumat met. In ohel, in a tent. But it does cause tum'ah from touching or carrying it. In fact, it's even the higher level that a Nazir who touches such a bone will have to shave for touching and carrying it. Now that's true for a small bone. Now, Revi'i dam, that does cause tum'at ohel, in general causes tumat ohel, all the more so a Nazir who touches it or carries it should also have to shave. But even though this is not the law, as we saw in the previous Mishnayot, only if it's a half of a log of dam, then that would cause a Nazir to have to shave, even whether it's in a tent or touching. But the Revi'i dam was in the 2nd Mishnah of items that do not cause. It causes tumah ba'ohel, but it does not make a Nazir shave even if he touches it. But this doesn't make any sense. So really, based on this Kal vachomer, right? If with the bone, it doesn't cause tent impurity, but a Nazir would have to shave if he touches it. So the Revi'i is more stringent. It causes tent impurity. All the more so, a Nazir should have to shave if he touches it. אמר לי, מה זה עקיבא? אין דנין כאן מקו החומר. וכשבאתי ורציתי דברים לפני רבי יהושע, אמר לי, יפה אמרת, אלא כן אמרו הלכה. And Rabbi Eliezer said to Rabbi Akiva, what is this Akiva? We do not make such a kal vachomer. And in fact, when Rabbi Akiva went and taught this also, presented this theory to Rabbi Yeshua, he says, very nice. I like your logic. Your logic is fine. Your reasoning can't poke any holes in it. But this is the halacha. And if you have something that is a tradition, then the tradition triumphs over a kal vachomer that's based on reason. So this is another very important principle. Yes, you can use a kal vachomer, you can use reason and logic anytime you're filling in a gap to figure out what the law is. But if there's an explicit tradition about something, then the tradition overrides the logical derivation. Okay, Gemara on that. Ibaya lehu aisim kisora halacha urbitam kal vachomer ve'en danin kal vachomer mahalacha. Or dilma revi'itam halacha ve'aisim kisora kal vachomer ve'en danin kal vachomer mahalacha. The question is, when he said, this is a tradition, what is this referring to? Is it that there's a tradition that a small bone, that's a tradition that makes a Nazir have to shave? That's the anomaly. But Revi'itam, that's what he was trying to derive from a kal vachomer, that if Esem Kesora makes a Nazir have to shave, then we'll use logic to say Revi'itam. But, we can't make a kal vachomer from a tradition. Was that how it went? Or maybe the other way around, Revi'itam, that's the halacha, that it causes tent impurity. And Rabbi Akiva then tried to say, well, if that causes tent impurity, and Esem Kesora doesn't, then we can derive a kal vachomer that even Esem Kesora should be less lenient and should not make a Nazir have to shave. And then the answer to that was, oh no, we can't learn a kal vachomer, and this is just an exception. So which way were we trying to? Were we trying to learn it like lechumra or lekula? And Tashema, Aisim Kesora halacha, Rebitam kal vachomer, ve'en danin kal vachomer mehalacha. We have actually a braita that answers the question explicitly and says the fact that a barley bone causes a Nazir to have to shave, that is the tradition. And the kal vachomer was trying to be machmir and say, Revi'itam, which causes tent impurity, all the more so it should make a Nazir shave. But then the answer was, no, you can't do that. You can't base a kal vachomer based on a tradition. A tradition is like an exception to the rule, and doesn't necessarily fit into a systematic structure of logic, and so therefore you can't build upon it. Hadran Allah Kohen Gadol.